Okay, great. So yeah, thank you everyone for joining my talk today. So I'm going to be talking about engineering metrics that matter and honestly the ones that can actually drive improvement for yourself or for your engineering team. Currently, I am the co-founder and COO of LinearB. We are totally focused on observability metrics and orchestration of these metrics for engineering teams. But previously, I was a VP of engineering. I actually scaled my last team from about 5 to 100 engineers before we were acquired. And this is where I really got obsessed with engineering metrics and what data could we use to actually improve engineering teams. I'm also the host of the Dev Interrupted podcast, and I get to talk to all of these great engineering leaders, like the VP of engineering at GitHub and the CTO at GitLab. And the coolest thing that's happening right now in our industry is a lot of people want to come on this podcast, my podcast, and talk about what engineering metrics they're using, why they're so important. So we kind of just see this swell of interest happening in the industry today. Before I dive into the metrics that actually matter and will help improve yourself and your teams, let's start with a few that you should avoid. So things like lines of code per developer or number of commits or individually stack ranking developers and even, measuring by story points, none of these will actually improve your engineering organization or yourself if you're a developer. Maybe with the story points, it's good for capacity planning and iteration planning, but it never actually improves performance. It actually leads to the opposite behavior. So these are the ones that you should really not measure. They won't do anything good for you. Now let's move on to some metrics that will actually accelerate your process and improve your engineering team. Time is one of those metrics that's kind of at this point mandatory to know and to measure at an organizational level and also at a team level. It's one of those DORA 4 metrics. It's in the book Accelerate. And what it's actually measuring is how much time does it take on average to go from coding on a branch all the way to deployment to production. And the reason why it's kind of one of those baseline mandatory metrics is it will show and identify bottlenecks within your software delivery process. So in this example here, you can see cycle time at the bottom. Our coding time is 34 hours. Our pickup time is 29 hours. And our deploy time all the way to the right is 12 hours. But our review time is 3 days. That's the bottleneck in our process. It's taking a really long period of time. And what I like to do is couple cycle time with PR size, the size of the pull request. What we see at LinearB for our community is when you have an increase in PR size, your size is getting up there like 433 code changes. We also see a correlation with long review times and taking longer to deploy. And the idea here is we want actually small chunks of work that can make it out into production, which will decrease our cycle time and increase our feedback loop. So that's probably the first place to start. Another metric that I really like, and I think is also fairly mandatory at this point, it's another one of those DORA 4 metrics, again in the book Accelerate, is deployment frequency. And what that is measuring is how often are we able to get new value out into the hands of our customers and into production. Charity, she's someone that came out on the pod. She has a cool quote here. Shipping new code should be as small and common, as regular, as unremarkable as a heartbeat. And so what we really want to do there again is get new code out into production, get value out into production, and shorten the feedback loop and increase the rapid learning cycles for the engineering team. So deployment frequency, another one that's kind of a must-have at this point. Now, the other thing that is interesting to say, if you're an engineering leader, you probably, want to know your cycle time, your deployment frequency, PR size, a few other metrics, maybe also if you're a team leader, a director of engineering. But oftentimes, developers, don't really care about some of these more dashboard metrics. What they really want to do is get stuff done. And so a great metric that goes along with actionable improvement is what we call idle time. And that's kind of a flow-based metric. And what that's measuring is how long is a developer waiting to do something on average, or how long is a piece of code just sitting there waiting for a pull request to be reviewed. The data that we have is about an estimated 80% of software project time is actually just idle time, either waiting to be released, waiting for a review, or maybe, a developer started working on a piece of code and then got pulled off to a production issue. We're just waiting. And one of the coolest things that we've done at LinearB, and I recommend, everyone either, to do this through LinearB or find another mechanism to do this, is to ensure that you have some type of automation that actually helps developers push their code through the software delivery pipeline. In this case, for example, on the left-hand side, you'll see, hey, here's a LinearB notifier coming to an individual developer and saying, hey, code requested changes are happening on your pull request. Go and check them out. Now we can actually see that code, more quickly moving through the software development process. And also, the thing that it really helps developers do is maintain situational awareness. And what that means is, as my code can more quickly move through the delivery pipeline, I can maintain my context. I know I just wrote that code maybe 15 minutes ago. I know what its purpose is. If we're waiting days and days, for example, to get code out to production or to review, I have too many context switches, and we're going to lose a lot of efficiency. So idle time is a really cool one to measure. Another metric that I'm a big proponent of, and if you don't have it already, it takes a little bit, you got to make sure they're using a tool like a LinearB. Okay, improve quality and reliability with Code Churn. So Code Churn is a quality metric, and what it measures is how much code are we actually reworking over a short period of time. It means we're changing the code a lot within a 2-week period. What we see from our community is high code churn actually correlates to not only delays, but quality issues in production. If you're able to see code churn while you're still at the branch level, if you're a team leader, you can ask a question like, hey, do we really need to refactor and rework all of this code? Is it mandatory? If the answer is no, okay, maybe we can make some changes before actually shipping this. And if the answer is yes, okay, let's make sure our automated tests are there. Let's make sure that we have the testing available. So when we do release this, we're not going to have an issue in production. So code churn is a great quality metric. A few other useful metrics that I recommend everyone tracking, and you should be doing this in an automated way, is review depth. So that's the amount of feedback or comments that we're giving our developers on each pull request. So that's in the upper left-hand side here. Mean time to restore, or MTTR, that's again one of those classic DORA metrics, kind of a must-have. That's measuring how long does it take once we have an incident in production to actually restore the service. An investment profile at the bottom, what that's saying is, what type of work are we actually working on? Are we working on new functional stories? So that's new value for our customers. Or are we doing a lot of development back-end non-functional style work? Or are we fixing bugs? That's something every team should look at. They should understand, okay, where are we at today? And does this meet our expectations? So here's a few other ones to throw in there for you. Now, just two quick case studies that we have from our customer base. I mentioned before we have the capability to send each developer notifications about their code or their PRs. And with one of our customers, Illuminate Education, we call that feature Worker Bee. So with Worker Bee, we sent out 150 long review alerts to developers, 121 PR waiting for review alerts. And what it does is actually improve some of those KPIs or some of those metrics that I previously talked about, like review depth, for example. How many comments or how much feedback are we giving for each developer? We also see another case study here with Unbabel, and this is Jonathan saying we wanted to democratize the use of data and automation for continuous improvement. So we rolled out LinearB. And some of the things that you'll see there is cycle time decreased by 65%, which is a good thing. Review time, the amount of time it takes to review a PR decreased as well. PRs that were merged without any review decrease. I think you get the idea here. When you start measuring and you have some orchestration to improve, you can actually make these metrics and improve your engineering organization. So if you're interested in my talk and you want to get, these metrics kind of out of the box and automated for your engineering organization, there's a few resources that we provide at LinearB.io. First and foremost, you can just go and get started with a trial of our product. And actually, we have a free forever version. It takes literally 5 minutes to get set up for. So feel free to do that. And also, we have a great community on Discord, not only the Dev Interrupted podcast that I'm hosting, but, we have about 1,000 or 1,500 engineering leaders that discuss different topics all week long on our Discord. So, feel free to join there. And then, of course, we have some resources like our metrics run book that will give you more detailed information of what is cycle time? Why should I use that? How do I use that on a day-to-day basis? So all of this is available for you at linearb.io. And if you haven't checked out a tool like LinearB, I totally encourage it. And you can get up and running and have some of these metrics and improvement in a few minutes. So thank you, everyone, for listening to my talk today. And feel free to ask me any questions after.